Hi guys, in this video I go over exceptions. In particular, I explain the exception hierarchy and I'll demonstrate how we can create a custom exception class and use the throws and throw keywords to throw an instance of an exception. Now let's take a look at the exception hierarchy. At the very top is a class named throwable that directly inherits from java.lang.object. This class has two subclasses named error and exception. An error represents an unexpected event in a program that a reasonable program cannot recover from. That means that program would typically crash and fail. On the other hand is the exception class. An exception represents an unexpected event that is not part of the regular flow of the program, but that a program can handle and recover from. Now there are many different types of exceptions, and each exception type is represented by a subclass of exception. Now these exception classes can be categorized in two types: checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. Checked exceptions are exceptions that are checked by the compiler, hence the name checked. That means when we have source code and we compile it, the compiler will make sure that we handle these exceptions. Unchecked exceptions are not checked by the compiler. That means our source code compiles fine, and when we run the program, all of a sudden an exception is thrown and we may not handle that exception. Now, checked exceptions are represented by any subclass of exception. It can be a direct subclass or a nested subclass. That is not the runtime exception and not a subclass of runtime exception. So any unchecked exception is a subclass of checked exception. So if we want to create a new custom exception class, it should be a child of exception. Rarely we want to create a new class that is an unchecked exception. Now let's go over an example. Let's say we have an input. We have a function that reads input. I call this read age. And here we want to return a valid age. A valid age is anything that is between 0 and 100. Now I create the scanner class so I can read that input in. I output a prompt and I read that age into the same named variable named age, and then I return that variable. Now I have not created any exceptions yet. Next, I call that method read age from the main and I output the age. So I keep this example very simple. Now I mentioned I want to create a custom exception class that is thrown when an age below 0 or above 100 is entered. I name this class invalid age exception. Now looking at the hierarchy, I want to create a checked exception. Most of the time when you create a new exception class, you always want to create a checked exception. That is done by inheriting from exception. So I add the extends keyword and exception. And that is all I need to do. I don't have to add anything else. I will revisit this later, how we can refine it, but I will leave it like this for now. Next, I do a condition here. I check if the age is less than 0 or if the age is above 100. In that case, I want to throw a new exception. So I call throw, and I don't have an exception yet, so I need to create an instance of this class. So I call the constructor invalid age exception. Now this gives me a compile error because it is a checked exception. So now the compiler checks and makes sure that this is handled by my program. In this case, I add the throws keyword. Notice that this is a throws with an S and this is throw without an S. Throw is a command. We throw a new exception. Throws simply indicates that this method may throw the following exception. There could be more than one as a comma delimited list. When I call this method here, read age, the compiler again checks. Unhandled exception type, invalid age exception. So it's a checked exception and the compiler tells me I either have to add the throws declaration to this method as well, indicating this method may throw that type of exception. But since we are in the main, it would be appropriate to add a try catch block. So I can click surround try catch block. Now I cannot really execute the system.out print line with the age if I didn't get that age as a return. So I add both these statements inside the try catch block. And I handle the exception in the try catch block. Now let's run this program. Let's say I enter 15. This will work fine because it's in the valid range of ages. Now let's try something invalid. Let's say I enter negative 15. This will now throw an exception, invalid age exception. It is caught by the program, and here I simply output the stack trace. Now the stack trace tells me exactly where this exception was thrown. So I can see, clicking on this line, it was thrown here on this method call, and if I drill deeper, I can see the line 38. This is where the exception originated. Now, if I don't want to output this stack trace, I can also output a message, invalid age, for example. Now, running this again would then output the message. So, for example, 110, it would output invalid age. Now, we can refine this. Many times we want to create a custom message to the exception. That can be done by adding a constructor with a parameter named message. And this message can then be passed to the super constructor. So the exception class always has a constructor that expects a single argument as string with a message. And here I can then add that message. For example, age is not valid. So I can, the age is very specific to this particular instance, so I can provide a customized message when throwing this exception. And here I can output it. Let's say output error, and then I want to get the message, get message. Need the plus before. And now running this, when I enter something negative 50, I get error, negative 50 is not valid. So how did this work? It entered the program, read in negative 50. Negative 50 is outside the valid range. So it entered the then block to this line. It called the new operator. So it creates a new object, and then called the constructor to initialize it, and it passes the string with the age to the constructor. So negative 50 is not valid. This is passed to the constructor. This constructor delegates it to the super constructor of the exception class, and the exception class stores it. Then the throw keyword throws the exception. It gets thrown. It matches to the catch block. So it enters the catch block here and executes the statements in the catch block. Now here it calls the exception get message. This message is defined in the superclass exception. So we don't see it here, but it is inherited. So we can take advantage of it and call it here. And then we output the customized exception and the program would continue. If there's any other code, it would simply continue. Now this gives you an idea how you can create customized exception classes and how you can throw exceptions and use the throws keywords to declare methods that may throw an exception. And that allows the compiler to check that you properly handle these exceptions with a try and a catch block. Also remember the hierarchy of exception classes and that there are two types of exceptions, checked exceptions and unchecked exceptions. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.